The new Mafia game, The Old Country, just came out, and I have a lot of appreciation for this series. I'm a big fan. I really liked Mafia 2 back in the day. Didn't care as much for Mafia 3. I thought it had a lot of good ideas, but it didn't quite live up to my expectations of 1 and 2, and I think a lot of that came down to its structure. Mafia The Old Country goes back to that structure, but there's a lot in Mafia The Old Country that I like, and there's a lot that I unfortunately don't like. Let's get into it. Mafia The Old Country follows Enzo Favara as he falls in with the Teresi crime family. After fleeing the sulfur mines, Enzo is saved by Don Teresi, a soft-spoken, enigmatic mob boss that sounds like another very famous soft-spoken crime lord.
And if our truce is dishonored again, I will repay that offense.
Teresi sees potential in Enzo and puts him to work at his vineyard where he meets Luca, a mentor-like figure to Enzo, Cesare, Don Teresi's hot-headed nephew, and Isabella, the Don's daughter, with whom Enzo has an instant connection with. Throughout the course of the 12-hour story, Enzo sinks deeper and deeper into the criminal underworld. It's a fairly predictable mobster story that's elevated by strong characters, thoughtful dialogue, and great performances. That said, Mafia The Old Country doesn't make the best first impression. Like I said, Don Teresi, the head of the family, at times reminds me a lot of Michael Corleone from The Godfather. It's an influence that makes a lot of sense, but it's one that can be a little distracting at times. And then there is Luca. Despite being one of my favorite characters at the end, he comes across as just another rank-and-file mobster. Fortunately, after the first couple chapters, their personalities start to come through more strongly. This is especially true for Luca, who helps guide Enzo through his new life within the Teresi family. Meanwhile, Cesare develops beyond a simple hothead as he struggles to live up to his uncle's lofty expectations. The only exception to this slow burn of character personalities is Tino, Don Teresi's consigliere.
Sticking around where you don't belong will be the last thing you do. Capisti?
Portrayed by Anthony Scorti, Tino makes a chilling impression out of the gate and frequently steals whatever scene he's in. While I enjoyed the characters, this story itself has been done many times before, even within the series. A young man falls in with the Mafia, his new life is exciting, but the cracks start to show. People start to die, and the protagonist must decide where his loyalties lie. Different names fill in the blanks, but the blanks are all the same. While I had many issues with Mafia 3, I appreciated the risks it took with its story. Mafia The Old Country, by comparison, feels very safe. If you've seen a gangster film, don't expect to be surprised by its twists and turns. Where Mafia The Old Country really excels, though, is its visuals. This game looks stunning. The way Hangar 13 has recreated Sicily for this game is super impressive. Every little detail is accounted for, and honestly, exploring that world never got boring. And I think Hangar 13 is pretty confident in this world too, because a lot of missions have you slowly walk around admiring the views, admiring all the little details. I think this, for a lot of people, might be annoying. For me though, as someone who was invested in this story and enjoys those little details, I found it to be super compelling. Honestly, it was probably my favorite part when there was an opportunity where I got to slow walk through an area and just check everything out. Early on, you go to San Celeste, which is the main city in Mafia Old Country, and it's been transformed into a fair for some races. You get to walk through these stalls, see people interact, there's a production happening. It all looks really cool, and it's super detailed, and it really pulls you into that world. Hangar 13 takes this a step further though. Not only does the setting look beautiful, it uses the setting to tell the story. There are a lot of instances throughout the game that use real-world events or just real-world sentiments of the era that use it to further ground the characters and the narrative. The game doesn't begin in a sulfur mine by mere coincidence. In the early 1900s, sulfur was a major export for Sicily, and the mines were notorious for their deadly working conditions and extreme exploitation of workers. Some mines were even linked to the Sicilian Mafia due to the decentralized government of the time. The sulfur mines are just one example of how Mafia uses real history to inform its story and characters. There's even one moment near the end that uses the geographical features of the area for a very dramatic moment. I think it works really well and comes completely out of left field. But I'll leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the details. Now, despite its apparent detail, Mafia The Old Country feels more like an elaborate museum exhibit than a video game. There's very little to interact with outside of your current main objective, and if you find a way to push the boundaries of the world, the game rarely responds appropriately.
Get away from me! What is wrong with you?
This is somewhat understandable given Mafia: The Old Country's linear mission structure. Instead of the seamless open world you might expect from a Grand Theft Auto or even 2016's Mafia 3, The Old Country's mission design echoes Mafia 1 and 2. So when one chapter ends, a new one begins, leaving little room for exploration in between. Broadly speaking, this is the right move and allows Hangar 13 to put its story front and center. However, if you find time to venture from the critical path or load up the game's exploration mode, you'll find a disappointingly one-dimensional world. There is no law enforcement, NPCs generally don't react to your actions no matter how chaotic, and weapon usage is restricted inside of most major locations. Mafia games aren't known for their deep interactivity and reactivity, and I wasn't expecting The Old Country to break new ground here, but it still feels like a step down from previous entries. And this extends to the gameplay of Mafia: The Old Country as well. Do you like instant fail stealth missions? You probably don't. Most people don't. Feels very old at this point, but there are quite a few in Mafia: The Old Country. Now, on paper, I don't necessarily mind an instant fail stealth mission if it makes sense for the story. And in some instances, it does make sense for the story. If Enzo starts shooting up a bunch of people without sneaking in and getting the thing he needs to do, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? He needs to stay hidden in order for the story to work. My problem is that a lot of these instances end in a firefight anyway. So it feels like you're forced to do stealth because the game wants you to do stealth, and then when the game doesn't want you to do stealth anymore, you start a combat sequence. Now this might be a little more bearable if the checkpointing system is better. There's one particular stealth section where you have to sneak into a government facility and crack a safe. I had to do this a couple times because I'd get spotted by weird things and the checkpoints would put me back outside and I'd have to sneak through that entire building again. Now, combat is an improvement over 2022's Mafia: The Definitive Edition, but this still feels like a generic cover-based shooter. You have two weapons, grenades, and if you have one equipped, a throwing knife. Aiming and movement are a bit stiff on a controller, and the targeting reticule can be pretty imprecise, which could feasibly be explained away by the unwieldy early 20th century firearms. A lot of the satisfaction in gunplay comes from explosive sound design and weapon feedback. The firearms in The Old Country feel deadly, knocking enemies back and annihilating the clutter scattered around the battlefield. It helps that enemy AI at the standard difficulty is aggressive and occasionally clever. Enemies would often flank and push an advantage when there was an opening, requiring me to react on the fly. Combat never became difficult, but it required just enough quick thinking and ammo management to keep things interesting. Significant encounters end in a knife fight. Mechanically, these fights are simplistic, but do a decent job of breaking up the pace of ducking into cover for gunfights. During these duels, Enzo can dodge, counter, slash, thrust, and break an enemy's guard. There's just enough depth to keep these brawls engaging, but they never develop beyond a mildly entertaining diversion. Thematically though, these fights quickly become ridiculous. Every important antagonist is ready to toss their gun aside and square up with Enzo, even if they're giving up a clear advantage. Early on, Enzo pulls a knife on his boss at the mines, and rather than intervening, everyone just stands around and watches the violence. Sure, to some extent this is standard fare for a video game. However, given how grounded Mafia: The Old Country's story and world is, it's odd that Hangar 13 falls back on this gimmick so often. In many cases, I would have just preferred a cutscene or a simple shootout.
Too slow.
Mafia: The Old Country is at its best when things slow down, letting you take in all these sights and sounds of Sicily. Like previous Mafia games, it nails the look and feel of its real-world counterpart by investing heavily in the details. Unfortunately, generic gameplay and dated mission design hold Mafia: The Old Country back, making it feel like a relic of the early 2010s. So I landed on a 6 out of 10 for Mafia: The Old Country. While there are things I really did like about it, the gameplay just kind of held it back for me. That said, I would still recommend this for fans of the series and maybe people who just want to explore Sicily. There's not a lot of games set in that era and that place, and I think Mafia does a great job of exploring that region. Have you had a chance to play Mafia: The Old Country yet? Let me know what you think in the comments below.